G from Dallas, Texas. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for the lovely invite, Simone. I'm Jeff Gould. I'm an alcoholic. And my home group is the Smoke and Gun Big Book Step Study of Dallas, Texas. We meet on Sunday nights at 6:30. My sponsor is Mike M. from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And can you hear me okay, by the way? Okay. And my home conference is Fellowship of the Spirit, Colorado, which it used to be in Silver Creek and Breckenridge, and then it was in, anyway, now it's in Estes Park. We'll see for next year. God, where do I want to get started? One thing I would like to say, this is kind of a special morning for me. Tomorrow would be my 18-year sober anniversary, but right about now, 18 years ago, almost to the minute, I took my last drink of alcohol. And I woke up and there was a deep sense of gratitude and purpose, and it's just good to be alive. What else can you say about that? And later on today, I know this is probably heresy for some of you guys because Thanksgiving hasn't happened yet, but me and the wife, we're going to put the tree and the lights up. I love Christmas time and the music and the lights and just the vibe of the whole thing. I always have, and so yeah, it's just a special day on a lot of levels. Kind of wanted to start off by saying, and we'll just see where all this lands. Bring in something to your awareness that's been very much in my awareness, and it really ties to what's been going on in the last year. I just kind of really took a very mindful notice, you guys, like this week, in the last few weeks. You guys, I'm a guy that's always been active in Alcoholics Anonymous. I went into the Arizona State Prison System for 7 years, went into juvenile corrections for 4 years, been published by AAWS 3 or 4 times, 3 times in soft print, 1 time in hard print. And I'm always a guy that I've always had somebody at the kitchen table, always had somebody on the phone, things like that. So one of the things I noticed, and I've noticed this in the last 3 or 4 months, and this is what I want to bring to your collective consciousness too. Sometimes things happen so slowly, it takes you a while to kind of upload, like, hey, what's going on? But I started noticing, again, I've always had 3 or 4 in the book, in the work, and maybe 4 or 5 on the other side of the work. And sometimes I'd have 1 or 2 of somebody else's, guys that they're sponsoring, calling me like, hey, could we spend a couple weeks on the 9th step? Could we spend a couple weeks on the 11th step? And I don't know, you guys, but I started noticing about 3 or 4 weeks ago, nobody calls me anymore for anything. I actually reached out to one of my guys and said, hey, do you want to start doing some work on the traditions? And I'm starting to notice in the meetings I attend a drop in the numbers, right? Now, let me transition to the other side of that. I'm very much a pioneer. Holy hell, how did I get muted? I don't know how that happened, you guys. Can you hear me okay? All right, we'll just start over. We'll just skip the speech I was about to do. We'll just start over. I'm Jeff. I'm an alcoholic. Man, that threw me off. Let me take just a second to get quiet. That threw me off a little bit. I'm going to invite God into this present moment so I can really share the God in me with you. What I was just saying, the short version is, you guys have always been so busy and so active in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I noticed about 2 months ago, nobody calls me anymore. And I was sharing, I'm starting to see a sharp drop off in some of the meetings and some of the Zoom format type meetings. There are people that were never into it. And then there's people for whom it lost its allure. And again, I've always sponsored, 7 or 8 or 10 guys, and there was always some other people's guys that would always kind of call me, and we would take a deeper look at the 11th step. And I just called my sponsor, and it's so funny the way intuitive thought works, because as soon as the words passed my lips, I already have my answer, where I was saying, Mike, nobody calls me anymore for anything. And as soon as I said it, I thought, well, Jeff, by the way, you own a cell phone too, you know what I mean? And you have about 1,000 or 1,500 numbers in it. And so every day when I wake up, I have a notebook and a pen, and I have a deep prayer ritual. And I just ask God, like, who do you need me to reach out today? Long term or short term, drunk or sober? Sometimes I'll even do the Ebby, right? Like Ebby's 12-step call was on somebody he used to drink with, right? Sometimes we discount that and don't even think, ever even stop to think, like, hey, that might be a good idea. Reach out to the people you used to drink with. They might not be doing well. And so I think change happens when the collective consciousness of Alcoholics Anonymous decides change needs to happen. And I'm a big, you know, we were always a three-legged stool, right, of service and fellowship. Due to recent and current events the last year, there is no service and fellowship. I mean, we have this, we have Zoom, but nobody's washing coffee cups, nobody's putting chairs together. So the people for whom that was the basis of their sobriety, guess what? They're not doing well, you guys. And I am seeing people disappear rapidly. Now, on the other end of the thing, I work with traumatic brain injury and alcoholism. I'm actually kind of a pioneer in a very specific way in this part of the industry I'm working in. The sharp uptick I see in calls that involve alcoholism, I would say, is about 500%. So I think in about another year and a half, we're going to have maybe 1.75 million new cases of pure alcoholism flooding into Alcoholics Anonymous. And boy, do I hope we're ready when they arrive. So if that's been your experience too, I just ask that we put our collective consciousness together and join together in prayer. And like, how can we be more useful given the circumstances we've been given? So anyway, gosh, where do I want to go? Yeah, so, you know, I'm alcoholic, and I know what it means to be alcoholic today. And November 22nd of 2002 would have been my first day entering into sobriety, and I'm profoundly grateful for that. I want to know if one of the admits, I keep getting these notices about the waiting room at admission, like it keeps popping up over and over, and it is hugely distracting. If you could make me not an administrator, that would be perfect, and it would be amazing. I'm sorry, it's just distracted me. So I could always close my eyes and not pay attention to it. On page 52, you know, I want to give you a little backdrop. Sometimes when I'm restarting the steps, I've gone through the steps 6 times. You know, I don't start my step work anymore on the basis of having a drink in my hand. It's been a long time since I've had a drink in my hand, 18 years. And yet, I have a condition called alcoholism, right? I can run, you know, I can be 18 years outside of the drink, but I'll tell you, I'm one day out of alcoholism, which is why upon awakening, every morning I take a treatment for alcoholism, as found on page 86, because when I don't, and you know, we'll get into this in a second, my wife really bristles with, she hates when people say I'm the real alcoholic, things like that. And so I try not to say that, but I am an alcoholic of the book's description, right? But going to the bedevilments, it says here on page 52, because this is the minutia that held my drink together. It says, we were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional nature. We were prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness and we were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be a real help to other people. And you guys, in between that drinking cycle, that acutely is what I suffer from. That's the internal stuff. That's the unmanageability. But there's one I kind of wanted to point out. I mean, sometimes I look at the way Bill says things, and sometimes I look at the way what Bill didn't say, right? And so when it gets to we couldn't make a living, here's what Bill didn't say. He didn't say we couldn't maintain employment. Now, when you hear my story, you will know that was very trouble for me too, this employment. But what Bill says is we couldn't make a living. Now, what's another word for living, you guys? And this is what I would tell my sponsees. Another word for living is life, right? I could not make a life that I or anybody else would want. So let's jump back about 25 years into my 20s. Sometimes I was unfortunate or unlucky enough to see somebody I went to Catholic grade school with, just run into them in the grocery store. You know, that type of event, right? Haven't seen somebody in 15 years. And they'd be like, hey, Jeff, you know, pushing their cart. Hey, Jeff, how you doing? And I'm thinking, and okay, like I'm obliged to talk to you, right, for 10 minutes. And I'd ask them, how you doing? And they would say, oh, we bought a pony for our littlest daughter, Kimberly, and we're going on a Disney cruise in February, and we're doing hot yoga as a family, and this one's in soccer, and this one got a football trophy, and we just bought a house on the east side. And they'd ask me, how are you doing? And here's the truth, you guys. If I'm even in school at the time, I'm on academic probation. I've already been sent an email or a letter from the dean's list like, hey, man, are you sure you don't want to withdraw? If I'm even employed, I've already sat down in front of the boss and he's told me, look, man, if you're going to show up late again, don't show up. We'll mail you your last check. If I'm even in a relationship, the police have already responded to the house 2 or 3 times and been like, you two again. What's going on, man? Okay, so who's going to stay in a hotel tonight? Because one of you is going to jail, if not. And if I even have a car, it's unregistered, uninsured, underinsured, has a donut. And if I'm checking the mailbox on any given day, there's at least one pink slip from one of the 4 utility companies. And here's what I want to tell you guys. That's when I'm trying. That's when I'm trying to have a life and go to school and work and be in a relationship and drive a car and do all these things. And it just felt like the thing was shaken apart every single time. It always seemed like through situations beyond my control, the thing was shaken apart. And so I would look at this life that seems to have a bow on it that's sewed up. And then I would look at what I had going on. And when the book says we couldn't make a living, man, I could not put together a life for me. And the thing was, I always thought it was circumstantial. I didn't know that was internal. I didn't know that the results, well, it sounds elementary when you say it out loud. I didn't know that the results of my actions were tied to my actions, right? Talk about being in delusion. And that's just one of my problems as an alcoholic, right? Because the greater problem, well, the lesser of the 3 is the fact that, as it turns out, I have a hypersensitivity to alcohol and other things, outside issues. But we're here to talk about alcohol. And Dr. Silkworth called it an allergy. But what I do know is I take 2 drinks and I get a sense of almost just right. What we know biologically and chemically is I don't have an enzyme that will help pass a poison called acetate. Acetate's part of alcohol. And so what happens is I drink and I get some acetate in my bloodstream. Acetate's like breaking open a thermometer and put mercury on a mirror. It seeks itself out. And so now that I got a little acetate in my system, and you guys, I'm not a beer guy. I've never been a beer guy. That has never done the trick for me. It never got me where I want to go. I like white tequila, salt and lime. I like Cisco. I like wild Irish rose. That's kind of my wheelhouse, right, of the things I put in my body. And so I saddle up to the bar and I have another vodka and pineapple, vodka and cranberry. And again, I'm overcome with this sense of almost just right. And as it turns out, the sensation of drinking hitting my central nervous system is the sense of almost just right. So at 2 beers, if I'm almost just right, man, at 8 beers, now I'm really almost just right. And the more I drink, the more almost just right I become. Very biological in nature, right? I want to take a moment. I just met a guy named Kelly in Dallas the other day, and I've invited him to be on this meeting. And I just want to take a minute to welcome him to Alcoholics Anonymous. He's a good kid, and I'm so grateful he's here, and I'm grateful for him. And then so now we get into the kicker, right? And I tell you, when I first understood what was in the chapter more about alcoholism, I understood quite clearly it was a death sentence. I belonged to this other home group. We meet on Wednesday nights. It's in a different fellowship, and I'll leave that part out of it. But I was listening to their preamble one day, very beautifully written. And this preamble says, we of such and such anonymous believe we suffer from an allergy, which we believe dooms us to keep drinking or using more. And we believe that's coupled with a mental obsession, which is the constant thought and preoccupation of ways and means of getting more. It said more or less verbatim. I was listening to that one day because it was a book study. And I brought it to group conscious next time. I said, hey, I was really listening to the preamble of this group. And what you said about, because this is a book study, but what you said about the obsession is absolutely 100% inconsistent with what the big book says. Nowhere in Jim or Fred's story or the Jay Walker story does it talk about the constant thought and preoccupation of ways and means of getting more. When I read Jim and Fred's story, they talk about a lack of thought and precognition, and that's the deal with me as an alcoholic. Like, I don't really think about it at all until I do, and then I do it, right? One of the craziest things, I've known this was crazy since 1995. One of the most insane things we do in Alcoholics Anonymous, and we give people our business card, and we say, hey, call me before the first drink. As if you actually would. Because I'll tell you, I've been in a year-long treatment center. I've memorized the Gorski-Miller scale, and I've talked to my father in an empty chair, and I've had phone numbers in my pocket, in all 4 pockets. I got phone numbers in my wallet, phone numbers in my phone numbers programmed into my phone. And I had programmed into my mind, I'm going to call you so I don't get myself in trouble. But when the unprotected thought arrived before the first drink, why would I call you? You're going to spoil a good time. Because it's not that I don't know that I'm going to drink. It's that I don't see any consequence on the other side of that drink. That's the insanity of alcoholism. I can't read the future. I have plenty of evidence to suggest what's about to happen, but that's brushed aside too, right? And so, I tell people, I just tell them, call me. Better yet, I'll call you. If you ever have a thought, if my name crosses your mind, call me. And if your name crosses my mind, I'm going to call you. And that's going to be the basis of our communication, right, going forward. So, I'm a story. I'm less a tactician and more a storyteller. So I want to tell you a story. It doesn't even involve alcohol, but it pretty well paints the picture. You guys, I had my hand cut off in a car accident when I was 19. We had been, when you're a kid, your mom and your grandma give you that warning, hey, keep your arm in a moving vehicle. Yeah, I found that one out the hard way. And I woke up from surgery. I've been in surgery all night, and they just sewed my hand back on. And it was, I remember at the time, I've never seen the award or the report, but I remember at the time he told me it was groundbreaking and history had been made with the surgical repair. Anyway, so he comes to my bedside, and I'm just coming to from anesthesia. And he says, hey, I want to let you know something. I've been talking to your family down in the waiting room. And I said, is that right? And he said, that's right. And he said, listen, they told me you smoke a pack of cigarettes a day. And I said, yeah, that'd be about right. He says, well, I got to tell you something. Nicotine, it constricts the blood vessels. And buddy, I just sewed all your blood vessels back together. And he says, so if you start smoking again, my medical prognosis is I'm going to cut your fingers off next week. And you guys, I heard that to the core of my being. I'm looking at some names here. I see Jess Padelko. I see Gary Miller. That'd be like me telling either of you gentlemen, Jess and Gary, if you take another drink of beer, I'm going to cut your fingers off next week, right? And you guys, I heard that. It shook me to the core sitting in that hot. I mean, I was already shaken to the core. I've been in a car accident. Very funny that my banner behind me is backwards. I don't even know how that's humanly possible. Anyway, all the banners are right. Mine's backwards. It's funny to me. So I didn't even try and fix it. I'm like, that's cool. So, I wake up and I'm coming to, and he asked me to quit smoking. I made a commitment to myself right then and there. I wasn't going to smoke any more cigarettes. I don't want my fingers cut. Are you kidding me? But something very funny happened when I left the hospital. Suddenly, on the drive home, I wasn't even home yet, the thought crossed my mind that a Benson and Hedges ultralight didn't even really like smoking, you guys. Not to me. And so I said, hey, Mom, stop at the store. And she stopped, and I lit one of those up, and it was like, yeah, that's not what I want. And I went back in and bought a pack of Camels or Marlboros or something. And I remember it was just like, And somehow spiritually, I managed to stick my head way down in the sand like an ostrich. And I barely and couldn't, with any clarity, really even remember, as the book would say, the operative warning of a doctor. Now, I bring that up to mention to you, that's the mind I had at 19 years old. I had the mind of a chronic alcoholic at 19 years old. Jeff, you could put up whatever fence you want in your life and say, oh, I'm never doing that again. I'm committed to doing something different. But my truth is yeah, you will. You'll be, in fact, you'll be doing it 2 days later. And so this was problematic for me, right? Because I had legal consequences that depended on me being sober. Couldn't do it. I had uh, love interests and school interests and things that all depended on, well, I would start these things. I never got very far, I will admit, that started on me being sober, and I could not do it. I could not stay sober. Least of all, I couldn't understand why. I never did understand why. You know, when I was brought into this way of life, um, it wasn't that when you drink like I do, you either end up in AA before you're ready to be here on behalf of somebody else, or you've had some lingering flirtation with AA for years. Chances are pretty good, as I had. And I got to tell you, the longer I stayed, the further away I've become from understanding what it is we really do here. Don't ask me how I missed that part of the equation, but it just, my friend Brian Crow back in Tucson, he says it wasn't until I was open to the idea that AA wouldn't work for a guy like me, that AA worked for a guy like me. Because it wasn't until I had that realization that I understood just how sick I was. And as my old friend Mickey said, we're in the land of miracles now, guys. And I got to tell you, I didn't come here walking towards the light. I came here running from the fire, but I was running. And based upon that simple truth that I just talked about in my first step, I was able to make a beginning, right? I was able to make a beginning. And you guys, I wouldn't even know how to sum up. Well, I got 40 minutes to try and sum up the depth of my gratitude to God and this work in power. Because what had happened so early on is it seemed like this benevolent, I was sharing in our Wednesday night meeting the other day. It was like all of a sudden I was asked to form a new conception and a belief system. And to me, you guys, this felt like little kid stuff. Like when you're like a 7-year-old kid and you have your like make-believe friend that lives in the closet. But at the time, you're willing to believe in that. You kind of talk to the kid or whatever, you know what I mean? I had some of that stuff. It felt like that, but very much as an adult, like, okay, I've got this deadly illness, as it turns out, and now I've got this like make-believe friend that I talked to. But the point was, I was willing to try. And the cool thing is on the basis of those two platitudes blended together, this imaginary thing that I began talking to began making a revelation to me. Our book says the consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you later. So if there's any new person out there on step 2 or step 3, then you're sitting there like, I'm not really feeling it. I don't feel any deep sense of conviction or any deep sense of, trust me, don't hold your breath waiting to feel that. Just keep going. One of the mistakes a lot of people make in the 12 steps is they're like, I'm on my 3rd step and I think I missed something. So I'm going to go back to the 2nd step. Trust me when I say this, you didn't miss anything. And if you read our book in the linear and static fashion where it's written, because our book is full of instructions, right? Show me the instruction anywhere in there where it says, if you're not sure, go back a couple steps. That isn't it. Our book says, keep moving forward. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. Just keep moving forward. And if you don't believe, act as it. If you can act as if the man that was full of faith, you're still going to get a result. Illustration, right? I see Mark C. He's our security guy. So if we're in person and you're acting up, Mark could thump you up a little bit. But we're on Zoom, so he'll just kick you out now. Anyway, so that's funny to me. Anyway, me and Mark were next door neighbors, right? And let's say we lived in the same HOA, right? And we both get a bunch of saltillo tile, right? And we got our wet saw, we got our grout, and he's gonna tile his house. I'm gonna tile my house. Now, Mark lied in the house and kind of bring out, he could believe the property value is going to go up significantly as a result of tile in his house. I could believe, I don't think it'll be that great, but it's the cheapest tile they sell at Home Depot. And I believe it might actually lower the value, but I don't want carpet anymore. So we're walking into this with a different belief system, right? About what it is we're doing. But the deal is if Mark and I both take this project on and we're working with our son, we're laying tile, the end result is we're both going to have a tiled house regardless of our belief system around that house. I think our second step works on that principle. I tell people, the cool thing about this big book is you can believe in the most Mickey Mouse on the face of the earth, and it's still going to work for you anyway, only if you take the actions, right? Again, I'm sitting in this noon meeting. This is a long time ago now, 14 years ago. And I remember this guy, and he came in like he was an addict, right? But the group didn't shut him down, and he shared a valuable lesson with the group, and I like to believe that I shared one with him. And he had been walking in the meeting from the halfway house, right? And so he said, they didn't pull singleness and purpose on him that day. They could have, but they didn't. And he said, "Hey, I'm Joe. I'm an addict," right? And he says, and Joe had in himself about 4 or 6 weeks sobriety. So Joe's walking to the meeting, and he says, I realized this morning, I was walking to the meeting, and there's a bag of crystal meth on the sidewalk. And I realized that God was testing me. And I thought, kind of sat with that for a minute, that organization of thought. And after the meeting, I pulled him aside. I said, hey, Joe, you open to something? You open to some feedback? He said, sure. I said, they used to ask these "is it possible" questions in Tuesday. Maybe they do in other areas, but we used to ask each other these "is it possible" questions. I said, Joe, is it possible that somebody dropped their bag of crystal meth on the sidewalk? And is it possible that the grace and force and the benevolent power of a loving God was the only thing that kept you from picking it up? And what I mean by that is we get to choose our conception, right? So why would I turn my will of my life over to something that's lingering up there in the sky, holding a bag of poison, getting ready to throw it on the ground, saying, let's see if I can drag you back to hell today, son? Because the benevolent and loving force I want to and choose to believe in doesn't operate in my life like that. It's the only thing keeping me from going over the edge in situations like that, right? So the more I took on this belief system, these funny little coincidences used to occur. I used to work in a facility, and I'm sitting around with one of the managers one day, and one of the young guys comes up, and he was on his step 2, and we agnostics. And he says, hey man, can I ask you guys a question? We said, sure, ask anything you want. He said, can I make voodoo my higher power? And I get a little spooky around all that, like dark stuff or whatever. And I started to say something. And the other guy I was sitting with, he cut me off at the pass in a beautiful way. He said, yeah, let's check that out. And I'm thinking, Peter, what are you doing? Why would you tell me that? Peter says, let's check it out. Let's sit down at this time tomorrow, right? And check it out. So I was curious where this is going. So I show back up at the coordinated point of conversation the next day. Peter had gone to the library and got a book on voodoo. He sits this kid down. He opens to page 12. He says, hey, kid, it says here, if you put 3 chicken feathers and eye of newt under your bed, your gout in your feet will go away. Do you got gout in your feet? Kid's like, no. He's like, okay. It says here, if you take the hoof of one calf and stick it in the fireplace and take 2 turkey feathers and, put them in the bathroom drawer, your neighbor's cattle will come back if his cattle are alive. Your neighbor got any cattle? The kid says, no. We go on like this. He says, so let me ask you a question. How is any of this nonsense going to help you stay sober? And the kid said, I guess it's not. And he closed the book and said, that's right. So it's back to the God idea, man. That's what we got, right? And I am so grateful. I never really give too much airplay to this story, but I got sober with a bunch of people that believed in mastery over the big book. I don't think you can ever master yourself, but they believe you could master the principles in this book. And they were very, I mean no offense, but they were very evangelical as well. So so I got caught up in that. And here I am at 3-4 weeks sober, speaking in tongues, healing the blind, raising the dead. They found out I had a friend that was in a vegetative state in a nursing home because he had aspirated on his own vomit. And they said, why don't we go pray for your friend every Monday? So we're, like I said, doing the usual newcomer stuff, raising the dead and stuff like that at 2 month sobriety. And I had to write some inventory because there was an insincerity going on in my program and in my person at that point. And I had to write inventory on it about a year later. And I'm going to kind of steer clear of this because you guys, I have no judgment, and I hope you have no judgment on me. But what I found out about in that particular thing is I was a self-seeker. And had they been wearing gold robes and passing out flowers at the airport, man, I would have been right there with them. And had they been wearing yarmulkes and studying the Torah, I would have went and got a different haircut and got that book too. Because the point was, I was so lonely. I had been living like an animal, like homeless for a year. Like I lived behind a hospital, and I kept my sleeping bag on top of a parking garage, and I lived in a desert arroyo. I'm from Tucson. If you're looking for a mental backdrop with which to assign the story that you're listening to, like reading a book, picture the desert, right? Because that's where I was in Tucson. And so, lost the thought. I'll get it back. Here we go. And no, I lost it. I'm not going to get it back. So anyway, I'm working with these guys, right? And I wrote some inventory on it, and I found out that I was just so lonely. And the one thing that was working for me, unequivocally, I did everything I was told to do in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was told to do a lot. And the reason why, you guys, I could not bear on my soul, at the core part of me, I just couldn't bear to let one more person down again. And it trickled down to, if my sponsor called me like, hey, did you finish those first 2 columns? I couldn't bear the thought of the feeling to be like, no, I haven't touched it for 2 weeks. And to see the look on his face, like, I just couldn't stand to do it again. To the simplest part of my life, I could not let anyone down again, because I had let everybody down, you guys. I'm going to jump and take a fast forward. I don't know if I don't know if I didn't really look close enough at the flyer to see if this conference had Al-Anon participation. Thank you, wives, husbands, and parents. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for embracing our way of life. And thank you for saving my life. Because it wasn't until my mother understood the basic principle of, what do they say, detached with love. My last year homeless, I'll tell you this, a couple things. When I started drinking at 15, my mom sold Mary Kay Cosmetics. She played tennis, she played golf. She had a photography studio in the house, and she was part of the HOA. When I quit drinking at 30, my mom's hair had turned white. She didn't have any friends anymore, and she took sleeping pills and went to bed at 7:30. If we're telling the truth, I recovered from my alcoholism long before my mother did, but she went to just enough Al-Anon to get the basic tenets, because here's what happened. And this was the end for me. And as it turns out, it was the end for her. Like I said, there was an outside issue involved. I can't shrink or change that part of the story. And so every weekend I'm living on the streets, and I look like homeless people do when they got one too many jackets on and a hood pulled over, and their jeans are grungy, and they got all kinds of stuff in their pockets. And I was just that guy walking around talking to himself downtown, walking around the bus station talking to himself. And every weekend she would go on a mission, and she would bring a box of Chewy granola bars, and she'd bring $10 and go look for her son that was dying. And but I remember one week she had found me in this alley, and she was sitting there with her car idling, and she was crying, and she gave me the box of granola bars, and she said, I need you to hear me not to come by the house this weekend. My mom worked in the medical industry, and she says, I had a medical convention to go to in Las Vegas. And what she didn't know, because I had a duffel bag slung over my shoulder with a bunch of red phosphorus and acetone, cold medication, and denatured alcohol and ether and blah, blah, blah. And what she didn't know Or let me put it this way. What I heard her say, you guys, was, why don't you come on by the house this weekend? Why don't you take a rock and break the window? Why don't you go in through the window and whip up a bunch of outside issues in my kitchen? And then I figured I could use the sale and the finances from the outside issues to fix the window. Like, what could possibly go wrong with that plan, right? But I'll tell you what my mom came home to. She was driving home from the airport and came home to a broken window. And she came home to an open front door. And she looked and said, where'd all my animals go? The animals ran away. Where'd they go? And she walked into her kitchen and there was a red hot oven coil on. And there was all this kind of felonious stuff in the kitchen. And I had left my driver's license on the table. I don't remember the rest of the weekend. I don't really know what happened. In our next conversation, she said, you are a monster. And you're not my son. And if dying is something you got to do it somewhere else, man, because I'm not helping anymore. And I can tell you, I can take, I don't know, tell my wife, you know, those Survivor Island shows, like, I think I'd be real good at that. Like, not that I'd enjoy it, but I can apparently withstand a lot of punishment because you guys, I can have my head kicked to the curb. I can take sleeping outside in the desert. I can take waking up with insects and ants and little fleas and things in my ears and on my feet and on my hands. I can take going to jail. I can take all those things, but I'll tell you this. It broke my heart to break her heart. And I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't do it anymore. Right around this time, 18 years ago to the minute, I knew I couldn't do it anymore. That's gratitude, right? If you're wondering what that's about gratitude. I'm not a big crier, man. And, 6 months later, we were talking again. She picked me up one day. There was actually a couple of big book illustrations in this. The line that hooked me from the book, you guys, there's a line, last full page of the doctor's opinion. And he talks about this guy, gastric brain hemorrhage and gastric hemorrhage, pathological mental deterioration. And he said he accepted the plan outlined in this book. 1 year later, he called to see me and I experienced a strange sensation. From a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck, it emerged a man brimming over with self-reliance and contentment. And when I really got that line in the book hold me because I knew it was less than a year. And I thought I could do just about anything for a year. I've been in jail for a year and I've been in college for a year. So I knew I had the capacity to do something hard for a year. And I decided to give myself over to this way of life because I was really hoping, and the kicker was I was hoping to be unrecognizable. I didn't want to look the same. I didn't want to feel the same. I just wanted to be I was so sick of being me. I wanted to be a different person. I didn't want to disappoint anybody. I already expressed that. And you guys, that was my experience. I tell you, I had been to our county social detox 7, 8 times. And I remember the morning, a couple of things happened on this morning. I was driving, I said, hey mom, stop at the donut wheel. And I got that big pink box of donuts that we get. I shelled out my $6 or whatever and said, I want to take this to the kind nurses and techs and medical staff that dealt with me so often that past year. I tried to karate kick one of them in one of my stays in detox. It wasn't a karate kick. It wasn't a graceful flowing thing. I think I probably flopped on the floor. I don't know karate. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't stop me from trying to karate kick somebody when I'm angry in detox. But anyway, I show up with this box of donuts and there was a nurse and I knew her. Her name was Rita. She had answered the door and she comes right out to the gate. It's a locking gate. And she says, hey, may I help you? And I said, hey, Rita, just here to bring some donuts by for the staff. And she goes, you are who? And then she looks at the tattoo on my arm and she goes, oh my God, oh my God. They're never going to believe it. From a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck had emerged a man brimming over with self-reliance. I probably gained 45 pounds too, which didn't help. But I just looked and felt different at that point. And then I was leaving with my mom, and my mom still does this. We're 18 years down the road, but every once in a while, she'll bring something up. And I think she's slowly been processing these things. And she says, sometimes I wake up in a cold sweat. And what wakes me up is in my dream, there's a red hot oven coil in my life, and grandma's things and her blankets and her crochet and all the photo albums. It's all turned to ash, and all I can see is that red hot oven coil. She says, I wake up and I can't go back to sleep. You guys, when your life and your action has become the subject matter of somebody else's worst nightmare, as the big book says, there's a long period of reconstruction ahead. A simple, remorseful mumbling that we are sorry isn't going to fill the bill. In this case, you guys, even reading the letter wasn't going to fill the bill. My amend was and then and is now to change, right? If you want to, I mean, just so we're clear, reading a letter isn't making amends. Reading a letter is indicating the actions to make the amends complete, right? And so I don't know that I'll get into the story here, but that was finally put right. Pieces of it had been put right, but I had to go home 4 weeks ago. My mom is starting to go, and I had to get her into assisted living, and I had to intervene upon her to see the need to get to assisted living, and I had to get a realtor and get the house on the market and get the house clean and get everything moved and get everything to Goodwill and all that. And it was a significant sum of money to undertake all that, and I freely spent it. And I went into that house where, like, there was so much pain in that house for me. It was 42 years of certainly mixed experiences. And when the house was finally quiet and it was clean, and I put the keys in, I had the keys, and it was just me in that house that I had grown up in, that I played snow angels in the backyard on the very rare occasion it would snow in Tucson, that I had tried to commit suicide in that back room. And it was just me in that house had a moment. It was like the house said, and we just released each other. And I got mom where she needed to be. And that last little bit of guilt, because there was always that last little bit of guilt, it just evaporated into thin air. I felt it go. I'm grateful for that experience. Grateful to be the son that could do those kinds of things when called upon and when needed to do so. So go on back to my, inventory, and we'll get through, we'll try and get through this set of steps I went through. I remember, you hear so much stuff about inventory, right? I always tell my guys, especially if they're new, listen, man, don't ever bring up inventory in a new meeting as a topic. We tell them, bring up the topic. No, how about this? Don't bring up the 4-step as a topic. Because in my experience, and especially if you're in a good group, and you guys, I am not a meeting guy. I am a focused spiritual entity group guy. If you're in a good group, you're going to get the same answer. Meeting, not so much. So you bring up meeting, and one person's going to say, well, I ordered a workbook off Amazon. This person's going to say, I wrote my whole life story. And this person's going to say, I did a back to basics. And this person's going to say 7 deadly sins out of the 12 and 12. And you're going to be so confused by the end of that meeting. If you're anything like me, chances are you're not going to do anything, right? The instructions are in here. I'm just saying, right? So I didn't know what to expect. I had heard a lot of stuff. Here's what I know and I believe now. I've been talking about this a lot at some of these workshops and things for the last 6 months. Some of you may or may not be familiar with the concept. It's called a Johari window, and operates on the principle, this is what I know, this is what I know that I know, this is what I know that I don't know, this is what I don't know that I don't know. And when I go into inventory, there's a lot that I don't know that I don't know. So I'm looking for new information. One of to me being successful in recovery is I have to take my perspective and belief system and being willing to substantiate that, set that aside, and take on your perspective and your belief system about my life and my situation. 10-step works that way. I'm sure you guys have been through that, where you're moaning and complaining, and all of a sudden your sponsor shoots you a new angle that's as clear as the nose on your face, but you couldn't see it, right? And so I understand now when I'm writing inventory, I'm looking for that unknown, that dark corner that I can't see in. And to give you the best example, and it's from my first inventory, you guys, I was so dead inside when I was 4 weeks sober that I thought about my parents and I felt nothing. I didn't feel anger, I didn't feel joy, I didn't feel pain, I didn't feel anything, right? That was the saddest part of all. And But there was a group of guys I did feel something about, man. I had these friends, and you guys, they ripped me off. Like my knife collection gone, my leather jacket's gone, my bicycle gone, my laptop, and it wasn't even a very nice laptop. I mean, it was like 2001 or what, all of it, right? I knew who took it, and I know how the situation came about that I lost all those things. I was raided by the U.S. Marshals, right, off a tip line. I had a laboratory in my house. I mean, I get that. Anyway, so I'm writing this piece of inventory, and it was like, I resent my friends because they took all my stuff and some other things. Affects this, that, this, and that, right? And by the time I get to the fourth column, I'm way out in the weeds, guys. But I was doing the best I can. And my sponsor was so gentle and gracious and so poignant. And he said, whoa, let's back up for a second, right? Because I think he had sensed I had maybe missed the point somewhere. He says, tell me about your friends. So you met these guys in the Eagle Scouts or something like that? That's a stupid question to ask. No, Mike, I didn't meet these guys in the Eagle Scouts. He said, well, what kind of people were they? And, just being honest, drink a lot of alcohol and shoot methamphetamines. And he said, oh, and he characterized, he said, so they were like addicts. Yeah, I guess you could say that. And he says, so you and these friends of yours, were you out there playing a little sand volleyball? Were you like volunteering at the local boys and girls club, something like that? Again, it's a student. No, Mike, he said, well, what kinds of things do you guys do? We're break into guys' work trucks, take all their tools, sell them, He says, oh, so they were burglars, in essence, your friends. I go, well, yeah, I guess, I mean, you could say that, I guess. And he said, I'm just so confused, Jeff. How did your attic burglar friends, how do they know where you live? Oh, we used to come over to the house and drink and, he said, wait. So you invited your attic burglar friends into your home. You showed them all your stuff. Now all your stuff went missing. And what I'm hearing you say is you're really upset about that. And you guys, in that moment, I saw into that corner I was talking about, and I had a change in perspective. As my friend Ralph says, I finally saw that I brought the wolf to the door, right? And that was a huge shift. And so that inventory became the key to every other page of inventory, especially in that one. Like, I understood that my actions had a correlation, a strong correlation, had everything to do with my results. Sometimes I used to end with that story, and I used to say this, you know what, you guys, I've been sober for 18 years, and my friends have never burglarized my house since. Like, oh my God, the program works. It really does, right? And so, that was the basis of an inventory and set me up for a lengthy, I would say there were 68 major pieces of damage and hundreds of small inconsiderations that had to be cleaned up. At 8 years, I thought I had recovered from alcoholism, and I thought I was done making amends. Like I said, many more have floated across my consciousness since. And what I've come to realize is the way that I was living, well, it was just going to be, that part of my life was just going to be an ongoing path. But I still, when they come across my consciousness, I continue to make those amends. And we'll talk about some amends stories in a minute. And then I kind of got into, one of the things they told me was, your life is not your own. You'll forever be spent in the service of other human beings. And that's just how it's got to be. And I believed that. And they had a strong presentation. And my life has always been full of other alcoholics. There's always been alcoholics at the kitchen table. There's always been some sort of functional group or step workshop in the house. We always, back in Tucson, the ex-girlfriend and I of 11 years, when somebody's loved one or spotsy had died, we'd get those Chinese fire lanterns and we'd write prayers on them and send them off in the backyard. Then we'd go hide in the house because it wasn't legal in the fire department, and probably call the police department. Anyway, we would have these beautiful ceremonies and then hide in the house, right? You're not supposed to set fire in the desert, but I think we were good, and it's just been a magical ride. This program has taken me all all over the continental US. I was always a guy, man, I used to follow some speakers around like we follow the Grateful Dead in my first 10 years, but there was always a mission to go on. There was always something to do. And you guys, if some of you guys are coming into like, those people that are 70 or sober that are just on fire, I love that age and that state of sobriety. But if you're coming into that crest, give yourself over to this thing. And if your sponsor ever asks you a question like, hey man, meet me in Miami Beach on April 1st, you know what? Go check it out. Or if some of the guys from your district that you don't know that well, they're like, hey, we're driving 200 miles south for a corrections conference. Do you want to go? And you're thinking, it's kind of awkward. I don't know these guys all that well. Why don't you get to know them well? Go, just go out on a mission, man, and see what this way of life has for you. And I'm a big believer. I did a piece of writing. I was going to ask my friend to publish it on his like super secret Facebook group. But there's ways and means of finding people and helping people. Sometimes I think, we have a whole chapter called Working with Others. And in that chapter, it might be a vision for you, actually. It says, but we believe life is much more than going to hospitals and helping settle old scrapes. And so the baseline that the book gives us, I'm just saying, the baseline, the bare minimum, is going to hospitals and facilities. They actually say it's much more than that. And so I was sharing with a group of there's about 25 guys in the room. This is it's the last year, right, before everything shut down. I said, hey, check it out. By my estimations, we're reading that part of the line. Raising your hand at the end of the meeting for sponsorship, that doesn't really qualify as 12-step work, not according to our literature, right? Go find him. Well, how do I find him? You know what? If you go to Baylor Scott and White, Dallas Hospital in Deep Ellum, go buy a pack of cigarettes and go sit in the lobby and look for someone to talk to. And you sit there for 4 hours, I guarantee you, you're going to make a friend. I guarantee it, right? Call your old friends that used to drink, see what they're up to. Go stop by the shop. Like, they're out there. The world is a freshly stocked pond of alcoholism. They're out there, right? And the cool thing is, I guess there's some of these old guys, and I respect that are like, I'm going to be your temporary sponsor, or I'm going to be your permanent sponsor. I think there's a much more gentle, palatable approach. If you see somebody new at the meeting, the next time we're meeting in person, pull them aside after the meeting and take them to coffee and say, hey, you know what? Pretty cool, man. But there's this body of work in this blue book. It's something I subscribe to. It changed my life. And if you're open to it, I'd really love to show it to you. And if you're open to it, why don't we meet on what time are you free on Thursday? 9 a.m.? Yeah, let's get together by phone. Let's get together in person. See, I don't care what you call it, step guide, sponsorship, you asked me, you didn't ask me. That has no bearing or relevance. The point is I'm helping people, right? I don't need a label to be helpful. I don't even particularly think you need that much time to be helpful. So anyway, I'm going to back into a couple of men's stories, and then we'll wrap this up. My father, I'll tell you my two, I guess, favorite stories to tell. One of the things that had transpired between me and my father when I was going to college, I called him, and I actually was going to go to community college that semester. And so I looked at books, and I looked at a student ID, and I looked at coursework, and I looked at registration, all that. It was about $2,000. I said, hey, Dad, I need $2,000. My dad really wanted me to go to college. He put away a lot of money for me to go to college. So he sent me a $2,000 check, and it arrived on a Friday. And I cashed the check, and it was too late to go to the admissions office. I thought, well, I'll just go to the bar. I was broke, And I probably spent a few $100s too much. And then I was like, oh man, I screwed up. Maybe I'll get involved in some green leafy business venture over the weekend and make the money back. And then I got ripped off, or, just do whatever I do, right? It's a catastrophe. It always is when you're talking about a guy like me. And by the time I even ended up going to school to register, I probably had $600 left. So now I sign up for my one class. I'm not doing well in it after 4 weeks. I withdraw and get the money back. And the rest of that semester, I was under the burden of my father's phone calls. How's Spanish? How's anthropology? How's psychology 101? How's pre-algebra 84? Oh, algebra's great. It's a little hard. and I could tell you the next 2 semesters, I didn't even intend to go. I just took the money. When this whole operation finally came apart, my dad says, "You're a liar and a thief. That's what you are." And, I had read him a letter at an airport. I don't know how I missed that part. It just wasn't in my recognition. But I had read him a letter at an airport that says I was a rotten son. You guys, my dad was West Point and his dad was West Point, and I was raised on the belt and the fist. That's how it was in my house. And me and my dad, we never played ball in the park. We never fixed a lawnmower. We never did nothing, right? And I blamed everything in my life on him. Anyway, I had read him a letter about that, but it was about 5 years later, and we were Hotel Congress in Tucson having breakfast, and he was very much on my mind that morning. And he said, "Hey," I said, "Hey, Dad, I owe you about 6,000, and I'd like the opportunity to pay that back." And my dad was in nuclear defense, and he got teary-eyed, and he said, "Everything I've ever done or built has been used to hurt people, like a lot of people." And he says, "Everything you seem to do seems to help people. And that's very generous. But if you're really committed and you seem committed to paying it, why don't you use that money and put it towards somebody else's school?" And it just so happened, it was not so long later, we were doing adoptive family through our work program. And I had found a girl who was a victim of domestic violence, had 2 black eyes, could barely pay her bills, had a bunch of little kids that played in the dirt, had dirty clothes. And we got them toys and clothes and a turkey and a tree. But I asked, her name was Nancy. I asked Nancy the next day, I said, "What would you do if you could do anything?" And she said, "I would be a nurse." And I said, "Meet me at Pima College tomorrow, and we're going to get you enrolled in nursing school." And I made that amend. And it was a few years later, for the first time, I bought a plane ticket to go see my father. He was in Tampa at the time. And my dad's a harsh and intense man, even in his older years, but I had gone to see him, and I didn't kind of want to be stuck in the house all weekend. They were starting to move at that elderly speed. I wanted to at least do some stuff. So I'm a big hockey guy, you guys. I work a little bit with some people involved in the National Hockey League, and it's my passion. My passions are fishing and hockey and whatever. And I told Dad, "Hey, I'm going to take you to the Tampa Bay Lightning game. It's going to be a good game." And so we went to the game. I got us great tickets right up against the glass, and I'm explaining the game to him. He's watching the game, and there's smoke and lasers, and it's a major league sporting event, and I'm watching the game, and after a while, I'm watching him, and you guys, it was like I could see a child's face behind his face. It was the strangest sensation, and I saw the joy, and we were leaving and walking down the steps, and my dad started crying, and he said, "This is the best memory I have of you, son." And I thought, you know what? Let me think about that. So yeah, this would be our best memory, wouldn't it? And it occurred to me, maybe that moment, maybe later that night, when we take the steps, we become the pencil. We become the pencil in God's hand, and we begin to rewrite our own history. Because as it turns out, my dad was never supposed to take me to the sports game. I was supposed to take him, right? And that's kind of how it worked. And I'll tell you one more. I think we can get through it and get to the top of the hour. It's the story I always close with. It's a 3-parter. And it's like Reservoir Dogs. You're going to be like, what's this dude talking about? When I was in high school, I lived in my car in the parking lot. I lived on the east side out by the golf course, but all my cool guy friends, leather jacket friends, they were all downtown in the music scene. And I was into all that stuff, heavy rock and roll and smoking cigarettes and drinking with my friends. And I'm not like a fun drunk driver. I've always drove 14 miles an hour under the speed limit with like one eye closed. And the thing was, I could not drink, right? And so it was starting to get precarious driving back and forth to the east side. I knew one of these days you're getting a DUI and you're losing your car, you're going to jail, and you're going to have all these fines. And I didn't know how to pay those and manage that. So problem solution. I went to alternative high school downtown. I just moved to my high school parking lot, had a trash bag full of clothes in the trunk, had a toothbrush in the ashtray, pillow, and a blanket on the back seat. I just kind of lived in my car. Being an alternative high school, they were cool with it, right? And so the thing about living in your cars, you're always kind of sick. You always have like the sinus infection or the flu or something. Had that been in today's years, I'd have COVID. I know it. I just haven't, right? So here I am living in my car, and I'm awkward and shy. I'm full of alcoholism. But there was a girl Her name was Justine, and she was a beautiful girl. And I had been sitting on my crummy little lack of self-esteem for 2.5 years before I finally asked her out on a day date. And she agreed to go right off the bat. She said, yeah, I'd go on a date with you. And you guys, I must have coughed or sneezed or something, or made a mess of the steering wheel just like that, because, I'm sick, chronically sick, like living in my car. And it was just kind of gross, man. And so, I kind of shrunk, like kind of imploded, and never did ask her out on another date, as the case may be. And so fast forward, second story, now I'm in the end of my alcoholism. I'm living downtown. Um, the library down there, there's like people beating each other up on the lawn, and sometimes the paramedics will take somebody away on a gurney, and there's people drinking out of brown bottles and playing dice and all those things. And I'm down there in all the riffraff of homelessness and street life. And I go into the library one day and said, hey, how many books can you check out? And they said 22, and so I got a library card and I checked out 22 books, big books on plants and Rolling Stone posters, and like what they call coffee table books, like 50 pounds of books. And I scrape the tags off and go to the used bookstore and get back on the business of dying, because that's what I do. And, and then I'll fast forward, about another 6 years now. And now I'm in early recovery. I had just gone to court and had all my rights restored and all an expungement of my whole felonious history. Even the guys in orange chained together stood up and cheered for me. It was a proud moment, and it was a good day. And the judge said, you're a citizen, you can vote, you can own a firearm, all that. So it's about 2 weeks later, and I'm going to vote downtown. I'm going to the Justice Court in downtown Tucson. And you guys, it's a fall evening, like it's been, and the sky is just pink and purple and yellow and orange, and it's just kind of quiet and peaceful. And I got my brown leather jacket on, I got a nice button-down shirt on. And you guys, I'm going to vote, and I feel like a citizen today. And just recovery and the clean wind of God is just blowing in and through me, and like I can feel it. Right? It's just one of those days where you're just on fire for recovery. And I start walking across this lawn, and it's the library lawn. And then my gut goes into that little knot, because we feel guilt by zip code, you guys. I thought, oh, well, there's an amends owed there, right? So I look in my wallet, I got $70. Yeah, I'll go clean that up. I walk into the library, and it's Justine. She's the librarian. And she says, oh my God, what are you doing here? And I said, had a couple overdue library books, came to clear some stuff up. She looks in the computer and she says, $410 you do in overdue library. She's kind of aghast, and she says, listen, I can cut that down to a more manageable rate and this and that. I said, Justine, I'm not looking for a deal. I'm just looking to, I'll give you $50 an hour or something, and I'll come back every month. We'll square up. She says, yeah, you got it. She says, let me get your email address. I said, here it is. She said, maybe we'll get you another library card or something. She emailed me the next day. She said, when you left, I went into my office and I wept. I had seen the tragedy that had become your life out the window. She said, but whatever happened to you, I don't know what happened to you. But what I do know is I've never seen somebody fight to hold on to life the way I know you had to fight to hold on to your own. She said, I'm proud to know somebody like that. Our book says here and there, once in a while, these experiences happen that to other people become phenomena. Ideas, attitudes, and emotions are displaced, and a whole new set of motives and conceptions begin to come over them. You guys, I might be a good example of Alcoholics Anonymous to the people that know I'm an Alcoholics Anonymous. I did not break my AA anonymity on that particular amends. To everybody else, I'm a walking, talking, breathing example that the grace of God is very real. Sometimes it intervenes in people's death process, and sometimes they show right back up on your front doorstep looking how to make things right. And everything I could be, say, and do in Alcoholics Anonymous, there's nothing I'd rather be than that. I'm Jeff. I'm an alcoholic. Thanks for letting me share.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Really appreciate your talk. I just love it when you get those body shivers